I've worked a lot of odd jobs in my life, but the one I did back in 2013 still makes my skin crawl even today. It was the only job that left me with nightmares long after I quit. Back then, I had been hired as the overnight janitor at a middle school in the Midwest. Most of my shifts started at around 10 p.m. and didn't end until 6 in the morning. The whole idea was that during the overnight hours, I could clean the classrooms, gym, and cafeteria without anyone being around. Pretty simple stuff: vacuuming, mopping hallways, scrubbing down bathrooms. But let me tell you, there is something very different about spending all night alone inside a school that's built to house hundreds of kids during the day. A place that should be filled with chatter, laughter, and energy becomes unnervingly silent when you're the only one inside. At first, it was just the emptiness that unsettled me, the way my footsteps seemed too loud, or how the hum of the vending machines in the cafeteria could make the silence seem even heavier. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me, sometimes flickering faintly in ways I shrugged off as normal. By midnight most nights, I'd usually have my headphones in, listening to podcasts to keep myself awake. But soon, I started noticing things that made me stop wearing them altogether. One night, about 2 weeks into the job, I was scrubbing down the floors in one of the hallways when I heard a single squeak of a sneaker behind me. It was clear as day, like when a rubber sole slides across linoleum. My heart jumped because I thought maybe some kid had snuck in. I spun around, expecting a teenager trying to prank me, but the hallway was empty, stretching in both directions. I stood there for a good 30 seconds, mop in hand, staring into the flickering light at the end of the corridor. Nobody was there. Still, I walked down and checked every classroom. All the doors were locked. Back in my supply closet, I chalked it up to my imagination. Floors squeak sometimes, I told myself. Still, it nagged at me. The very next night, I was emptying trash bins in the math wing when I noticed one of the classroom doors was wide open. Now, all teachers were required to lock their rooms before leaving. I knew this because I had to unlock them temporarily for cleaning. But I hadn't unlocked that door. Still, I pushed it open wider, flicked the light on, and stepped inside. The room was totally normal: desks in straight rows, stacks of papers on the teacher's desk. Nothing at all unusual. So I emptied the trash and shut the door. As I turned the hallway corner, though, I swear I saw that same door slowly creak back open behind me. I dropped my trash bag and stood there, staring, waiting for anyone to step out. But the doorway stayed completely still. It was the kind of thing where you can't explain what you saw, but you know what you saw. Things got a lot stranger in the following weeks. I'd be buffing floors at night when I'd hear faint voices coming from classrooms. Sometimes it sounded like a group of kids whispering. Other times like a lone person talking fast and low. Every single time, I would check the rooms and they were empty. I even radioed one of the part-time security guys who occasionally did rounds outside, just to see if someone had stayed late. Both times he told me the building was empty, that nobody was inside but me. But the voices continued, and they always seemed to vanish the second I opened a door. It escalated further when I started hearing doors slam shut down distant hallways. Loud, hard slams that echoed across the tiled floors. I'd run over, thinking some teenager had broken in, only to find that the doors were still locked. Lights off, rooms empty. One night, while doing my shift, I needed more cleaning supplies, so I went down into the maintenance cellar where extra inventory was kept. The basement of the school was something out of a horror movie. Low ceilings, cinder block walls, dimly lit with just a motion sensor bulb that flickered as I moved through it. Down there was the original custodian's closet, which supposedly hadn't been used for years since the school expanded. When I opened that closet, I noticed scratches on the inside of the steel door. Long, thin, claw-like scrapes etched deeply into the metal surface. They were irregular, going vertically down the door like someone had desperately tried to carve their way out. The shelves inside were coated in a thick layer of dust. But what chilled me wasn't the dust. On the floor, in the far corner, was a tattered navy blue janitor's uniform, crumpled and filthy, as if someone had just peeled it off and left it there. I didn't touch it. I backed out slowly, shut the door, and tried to shake it from my head. About a month into working this overnight shift, I was assigned to wax the gymnasium floors. That meant being in the largest, darkest part of the building for hours, pushing the heavy waxing machine across the polished wood. The sky outside was black, and only the squeak of the machine joined me in the cavernous space. At some point, I shut the machine off to rest. As the low hum of the motor stopped, I noticed something across the gym. On the far set of bleachers, maybe 30 yards away, I saw what looked like a shape sitting on the bench. Just sitting. It was pitch black, darker than the rest of the room. I squinted, frozen to the floor. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but then the shape stood up. It didn't move normally. It sort of unfolded, tall and lean, limbs too long for its frame. I dropped my mop bucket and ran to the nearest light switch, flooding the gym with brightness. And of course, the bleachers were empty. No one there. But as I walked forward, I realized dust footprints trailed across the polished floor from the center court, directly to where I had been standing. And they weren't shoe prints, they were bare, human-shaped footprints. Probably the most terrifying thing happened in my 3rd month. I was in the cafeteria working on the floors when I heard a phone ringing in the main office. The landline phones inside the classrooms could only make internal calls, meaning nobody outside the building could reach them. That phone shouldn't have been ringing. Cautiously, I walked into the main office. The ringing stopped just as I reached the desk. On instinct, I picked up the receiver. There was silence. For a few seconds, nothing but dead air, until I heard something that made my stomach twist. A low voice whispered, "Get out." I slammed the phone down and bolted outside for fresh air, heart hammering in my ribcage. Later that same night, I ran into the part-time security guard outside by the dumpsters. I asked him point blank if he'd ever heard or seen weird things inside the school overnight. He didn't even flinch. He just looked me dead in the eye and said, "You mean the janitor?" I asked him what he meant, and he told me a story. Apparently, back in the late 1980s, one of the school's custodians had gone missing inside the building. He was an older man, quiet, who mostly kept to himself. They said he'd showed up for his shift one night and was never seen again. Cops combed the building, searched the woods nearby. Nothing. Soon after, teachers started talking about things disappearing from classrooms, lights switching on at night, strange noises. The school quietly replaced him with someone else, and the kids mostly forgot. But the old maintenance cellar, that had been his. I felt sick when he told me that because I immediately thought of the uniform I'd seen down there. I stayed working maybe 2 more weeks after that story, but the activity got worse and worse. My mop buckets would be mysteriously kicked over when I turned my back. The elevator between floors would move on its own, and I'd see movement just out of the corner of my vision constantly. The last straw came one night in December. I was finishing up near the library when I heard footsteps echoing down the long corridor. Slow, dragging footsteps. I froze, listening, and every hair on my body raised. At the end of the hallway, under the faint exit sign glow, I saw him. A tall, gaunt man in a faded janitor uniform, one arm hanging loosely at his side like it was broken. His head was tilted unnaturally, his face shadowed. The way he moved wasn't like normal walking. It was delayed, twitchy, but steady. Each step making that awful rubber-on-linoleum squeak I'd heard weeks ago. I dropped everything and ran. I sprinted past classrooms, through the cafeteria, bursting out the service exit into the freezing night air. My heart felt like it was exploding inside me. When I came back the next morning with the daytime janitor staff there, I went to grab my supplies from the hallway I'd abandoned. But here's the thing. Everything was already cleaned. The floors were spotless. The trash bins emptied. The windows smudgeless. Almost like someone else had already done my whole night's work. That was it for me. I quit that same week, and I've never worked as a janitor again. I still have dreams about that hallway sometimes. Sometimes I dream I'm back there, mopping the floor. When I hear that squeak behind me, I turn, expecting nothing. But then I see that uniformed man, his head tilted, staring silently, like he's been waiting for me to come back. You never really know what goes on in a building after hours, especially schools. People might think every school is just brick, mortar, and faded paint, but there's a type of darkness that fills those empty spaces. When everyone's gone, something that lingers in the echoing halls, or pressed up against the windows of abandoned classrooms. I never used to believe any of those ghost stories growing up, but that was before my winter working night shift as a janitor at Ridgeway Elementary. I got the job through a friend's uncle, desperate for money after losing my previous gig. It sounded easy enough, 6 hours a night. Just me and an old man named Walt, who'd been there so long half the teachers said he came with the walls. There was something strange about Walt, though. He never talked unless you asked him a direct question, and the way he'd glance down certain corridors with a deep frown made me uneasy right from night one. My second week, I was told to stay away from the boiler room in the basement. Walt was insistent on that, almost superstitious. I had chalked it up to OSHA rules, or maybe asbestos, but he got real irritable if I even asked what was down there. Whenever he caught me by the stairs, he'd say, "No need to go below, son. They want their peace." One snowstorm, Walt called off sick, and I was left to run the building alone. With everything so quiet, the constant banging from underneath the floor started to drive me nuts. It didn't sound regular, not pipes or normal maintenance noise. It was a rhythmic thunk, like someone hammering on the metal door to the basement every few minutes. Curiosity eventually got the better of me. Around 2 a.m., I found the old brass keys in Walt's closet and went down. The light flickered the entire way, and as I reached the bottom, the air grew heavy and cold. The boiler door had deep scratches round the handle and what looked like faded handprints on the dusty glass pane. The sound stopped as soon as I set foot on the concrete floor. Against my better judgment, I turned the key and went in. The heat from the boiler made the air wavy, and it took me a minute to realize there was something scribbled in chalk on the tiles, right in front of the furnace. "Let us out." I stared at it, my pulse racing. The noise never returned, but I swear I could feel eyes on me the whole way up the stairs. Over the next few weeks, things at Ridgeway got stranger. Sometimes, as I mopped the entryway, there'd be tiny, muddy footprints trailing across my clean floor kid size, even though there were never any children in the building that late. Classroom 204's overhead lights would flicker violently whenever I walked past, but nobody else seemed to notice or care. The security cameras that I checked at the end of each shift would glitch only in the halls near the basement, pixelating into static whenever anything moved. What got me most, though, were the voices. Whispers, drained of energy, desperate and urgent, coming from behind closed classroom doors. More than once, I'd hear what sounded like a little girl calling for help just as I shut off the lights in the east wing. One night, while wiping down the gym, I heard a bouncing echo, like a rubber ball, repeatedly thudding on the far end wood. The noise got louder as I approached, but the lights above the bleachers cut out the second I reached for the locker room door. I froze, and that's when I saw her, a little girl with stringy blonde hair, in an old-fashioned school dress, ankles and shoes caked in mud. She was holding a torn jump rope staring at me with empty black holes where her eyes should have been. "Come downstairs," she whispered, then faded into nothing. After that, I couldn't sleep for days. I tried talking to Walt about it, about the noises, the chalk writing, the ghost girl. He never met my eyes and just muttered, "I told them not to dig up that wall back in '93. Nobody listens." As a joke one night, I left a stack of old test booklets on the desks in the East Wing classroom and placed a box of chalk next to the board, hoping to catch some evidence from my friends. When I came back, the room was dark, but the chalkboard had childish writing on it. "Class dismissed." The booklets were opened as if someone had thumbed through every page. I checked the security footage, my stomach in knots. There, at 3:13 a.m., clear as day, paper rustled and booklets flipped by invisible hands. The temperature in the break room dropped 10 degrees as I watched. One Friday, Walt called me into his tiny janitor office, and after pouring us both coffee from a gurgling pot, he locked the door. He finally told me the truth, the reason he never left this job, even after all these years. Past winter, 1989. Before you were born, a teacher left her class of first graders alone for just a few minutes during a storm. She stepped outside to answer a call from her husband. When she came back, the boiler had caught fire. Smoke filled the east wing while the circuit breaker jammed. She couldn't get the doors open. 7 little children and their teacher never made it out. By dawn, the fire was out, but the only thing left was a melted jump rope in one corner. He paused, eyes glistening. "Sometimes I see them too." The following Tuesday, the school principal informed us of a practice lockdown drill after hours, which was odd, since it had never happened on night shift before. Around midnight, all the lights snapped off at once, except for the pale emergency glow above the main doors. My radio erupted into static, and somewhere nearby, a metallic clang echoed through the halls. Trapped in the dark, I fumbled my way toward the main lobby. As I neared the east wing, I could feel the temperature drop, breath fogging in the air. A thick fog, impossibly cold, began to pour out from under the basement door, seeping across the tile like dry ice. Within it, faint figures revealed themselves, children in outdated uniforms, their faces smudged with soot, silent except for the girl with her jump rope, lips moving soundlessly. They formed a circle around me, reaching out, and as their hands brushed my arms, I felt a gut-wrenching cold shoot through my whole body. Suddenly, Walt appeared behind them, swinging a heavy ring of keys like a preacher at an exorcism. "The living don't belong here," he shouted, and for an instant the fog recoiled. We bolted up the stairs together as a deafening pounding erupted from below, echoing up concrete walls. The next day, the principal claimed there had never been a lockdown scheduled, and the security camera footage near the basement was corrupted. I moved on to a new job shortly after that, turning in my keyring and uniform. But the last time I spoke to Walt, well, he didn't look any older. Not one bit. A month later, while reading the local news out of curiosity, I saw a short obituary notice. Walter G. Price, beloved janitor of Ridgeway Elementary, passed away peacefully in 1992. My blood ran cold. The photograph in the column was exactly the man I'd worked with. So who had I been working side by side with all those weeks? Sometimes I wonder if Walt stayed behind to keep those ghosts from ever making it out, to make sure no one else made the same mistake as that teacher all those years ago. Sometimes when schools are closed late at night, the souls who keep them clean are the same ones who've never truly left. Some jobs stick with you, even years after you leave them behind. I wish I could forget my time doing night shifts at the old Pine Ridge Hospital, but no matter how hard I try, There are some memories that claw their way back, especially when darkness falls and the house is quiet. I worked at Pine Ridge back in 2018. The place was about to be demolished. The city was waiting on permits, but for a few months, I was stuck cleaning out the old emergency and psych wards. This place had been abandoned for years. There was no heating. The paint peeled off in long strips, and every sound bounced down empty hallways like the building was whispering secrets. My shift was from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Most nights, it was just me and another guy, Paul, who preferred to sleep through his shift in the break room rather than explore the darker corners. I don't blame him. I wish I had done the same. Early on, there was talk among the city workers about a hidden sea wing, a hallway so old and walled off that no one knew what was inside. Some said it was used back when the hospital did things nobody talks about anymore. Experimental treatments, electroshock therapy, things that left their scars. One night, under a flickering light while scrubbing a stairwell, I accidentally knocked against a panel in the wall and heard a faint hollow echo. There was a seam, a hidden door, almost invisible under layers of old paint. On a whim, I pried it open. The smell that hit me was like iron, old rot, and something sharp I couldn't place. Inside was a long, windowless hallway lined with padded doors. The air was freezing, and it felt heavier with every step. The silence pressed down on me so hard I could barely breathe. At the very end, there was a rusted wheelchair tipped over, its seat indented deep, as if someone had sat in it for years. Just as I shone my flashlight down the hall, I heard soft music playing an old-time piano tune, distorted, warbling out of thin air. It drifted closer, but I couldn't see the source. I bolted out, slamming the hidden door and wedging a cart in front of it so nothing could get out. About a week later, I was finishing up waxing floors on the second level when I heard someone humming Happy Birthday down the psych wing corridor. The sound was slow, sad, and off-key. I followed it, heart pounding, thinking maybe Paul was screwing around, or one of the urban explorers who sometimes broke in. I reached room 12. The door, jammed for decades, was wide open. Inside, it was pitch black except for the green shadows cast by the exit sign in the hall. In the middle of the cracked linoleum floor, there was a small child-sized birthday cake, one of those plastic toy kinds, used for therapy sessions with every fake candle lit, flickering like real fire. Then, I noticed words scratched into the wall above the headboard again and again, in deep, desperate gouges. Don't blow them out. I stepped back, tripping over something soft. It was a faded hospital bracelet reading, Mary Ellen, 1977. The humming stopped. When I looked up, a small pale face stared at me from under the cracked mattress, lips stitched in a pantomime of a smile. I ran, cake and all, and locked myself in the supply closet until sunrise. Soon after that, things picked up. Items I'd cleaned would end up filthy again in minutes. The nurses' call buttons would buzz with no power supply. A trail of red wheelchair marks snaked down hallways that hadn't been touched for decades. Worst was the feeling I was constantly watched, no matter where I stood. The hospital's old windows would reflect twisted, shadowy faces, peering from behind me. One night near Christmas, I paused in the main lobby to catch my breath and looked toward the revolving door. There, in the glass, stood a dozen blurry shapes: doctors, nurses, patients packed tightly, all of them staring at me with hollow, pleading eyes. Behind them, Mary Ellen crouched, her plastic birthday cake held tight, beckoning for me to follow. The security lights began exploding, one by one, plunging each part of the hospital into darkness, drawing the shadows closer. My phone flickered with message after message, all the texts reading the same thing: "Don't leave us." It was Paul, of all people, who finally spoke up. He handed me an old, water-damaged photo he'd found in the basement office. The caption read, "Staff, Pine Ridge Asylum, 1978. There were 20 people in the photo orderlies, doctors, and, in the back row, an older janitor in overalls holding a mop. Paul said he'd seen that janitor wandering the halls at night, soaking wet and humming that old birthday tune. You can't let him see your face," Paul whispered, eyes wide. "If you look in his eyes, you'll get trapped in room 12, with Mary Ellen and the others." He quit that night and never came back. My own final shift came on the night of a blizzard. Snow piling up so fast nobody could leave. The building moaned with wind, its innards rattling like bones. My phone was dead. No radio signal. There was only me, my flashlight, and the sound of that relentless humming. As the wind howled, the hidden sea-wing door swung open by itself. I could hear wheelchair wheels squeaking closer, closer. In the shadows, Mary Ellen crawled along the linoleum, her fake cake flickering. The old janitor followed behind her, empty eyes leaking black tears, mop dragging a wet, rotten trail. Everything cold and rotten and ancient in the hospital came pouring into the main halls. The walls warped, the windows fogged, and suddenly the building itself felt alive. I bolted for the main entrance, but a sea of ghostly faces blocked every path. Children, patients, nurses, the missing, the forgotten. The old janitor's hand landed on my shoulder. It was ice cold, the chill spreading through my skin. He whispered, "We clean together now." The world spun, my vision went black, and every single light in Pine Ridge snapped off. The next morning, demolition crews found the hospital completely dark, every window fogged too thick to see inside. My car keys were found in the main lobby, caked in dust. They say if you listen outside the chain link fence at night, you can still hear a piano playing. And sometimes you'll spot a man in overalls, pushing a mop and humming quietly as he works his way through an endless, spectral shift. And, on some snowy nights, a little girl whispers from the shadows, "Don't blow them out." If you made it to the end, don't forget to like this video, comment with your most chilling experience, and subscribe for more disturbing true stories. Remember, sometimes the janitor isn't the only one left behind.